erupted. And I went, oh. So I go outside and look again. This massive cloud that went as far as the eye could see from the left and to the right was moving very quickly. Within an hour, 100 miles away from Mount St. Helens, it was so dark that the street lights came on. Then it became so dark and so filled with ash that you couldn't even see the street lights. Now, we didn't know at the time, while it was happening, if there was anything toxic in it. All we knew is that we were being inundated with this cloud of ash that was so dark you couldn't even see the street lights anymore. I was afraid to even start my car because it was going to suck up all of this ash through the carburetor. That's the last thing I wanted. So when we talk about the sky being darkened, if we have this earthquake and volcanoes and all of these things going off all at the same time, it is very possible for the sky to be darkened, for the moon, or for the sun to not show its light, because I've seen it. I've experienced it. And, there's probably a lot of you who watched it on TV who's seen this very same thing. It took a long time for this dust to settle. And when it did settle, there was like a foot of it on the ground. It looked like a dark gray snowfall. It was incredible. So days after this global earthquake, they say that a lot of Earth will be set on fire by these giant or medium-sized hailstorms of meteorites, and that this hail is going to set the world on fire. Now, it comes in thirds. Why does it say that a third of the grass is going to be burned? A third of this, a third of that. Well, think about this. As the Earth rotates, if this meteor shower is coming from one direction and one direction only, if it's, coming from, say, I don't know, east, west, whatever, as the Earth rotates, it's going to hit probably about a third of it at once. It's hard to imagine, although it may be, it's hard to imagine that the entire Earth is going to be inundated all at once with every kind of meteorite. It would have to come from all directions. I think that's why the Bible breaks it up into thirds. Well, like I said, the planet routinely experiences these hailstorms every year. I think the reason for this is the gravity of Earth in the orbit of the debris that hits us gives the appearance of shooting stars. These shooting stars are white-hot chunks of space debris. This space debris sometimes comes in as fast as 60,000 miles an hour. That's why when it hits the Earth's atmosphere, it heats up, turns white hot. Not very many of them actually hit the ground, but some do. So far, this hasn't really been a serious threat, except for those folks in Russia who recently experienced a serious threat. These things hit us all the time. Researchers find these craters all of the time. There are huge craters where these things have hit us in the past. Think of the consequences when millions of white-hot rocks rain down on Earth. We may have a good example of the consequences. Some scientists now believe that the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 was not caused by Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over the lantern like everybody thinks. That it may have been a meteor shower, because there's historical evidence that says a string of fires were ignited in a straight line about 2 miles across the north central part of the United States that same night. At the same time, in fact, the whole town of Prosciutto, Wisconsin, mysteriously caught fire and burned to the ground that same night. Survivors reported seeing streaks of fire falling from the sky. What caused all of these enormous fires to start burning all at the same time on the same evening? Scientists think that this was white-hot meteor shower falling to Earth. Well, the Bible describes balls of fire. John writes, "The the second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Well, now there's some explanations for what this might be. I personally think that this describes a large asteroid, or maybe a large meteor the size of a mountain hitting the ocean. You know, the term mountain is an accurate term for a large asteroid. If an asteroid a mile in diameter was sitting on the surface of the Earth, it'd be called a mountain. 5,000 to 6,000 feet high, even more. Well, John's description of an asteroid impacting the sea is identical to a scientific model created by a lot of credible universities some years ago. For example, the tidal wave that was caused by a great asteroid would actually destroy ships for hundreds of miles in every direction, probably even the ones that were docked. Now, think about the commotion of the sea after something this size hit the ocean. You can see the roaring of the ocean in Luke 21. There were some studies that were conducted at the University of California where an asteroid of this magnitude would be so hot by the time it hit the ocean, it would make the ocean water anoxic. That means oxygen deficient. That it would simply boil the oxygen out of a large area of the sea. Sea temperatures would rise dramatically. The hot water would kill billions of sea creatures in a very large radius, probably a third, which would explain this. Anoxic water resulting from an impact of this size is a perfect environment for the growth of a red algae, or what's known as red tide. Some of you already know what red tide is. We've talked about red tide a few times before. When John said that the sea turned into blood, he may have been describing this red algae that thrives in oxygen-deficient water. Or some of the conspiracy theorists say that if this is a break-off from this planet X, and it's actually a big piece of iron oxide the size of a mountain, and it's oxidized, because we know the oxidation of a piece of iron is red. If it hits the water and it's already red, it's going to turn everything around it. Everything it impacts would turn that red. So it's part of an iron oxide brown dwarf star. Or even if it's a piece of it that's broken off, even if Planet X, the brown dwarf star that's described by conspiracy theorists, even if this thing really does exist and it doesn't come close enough to impact the Earth or to make an impact on our environment, what if a piece of it came off and strayed away from Planet X and was the size of a mountain or ocean? Would kill the water. It would kill everything in the sea and it would turn red. It is a possibility. But there's other great fireballs. They're also described in the Bible. John describes a great star that impacts the earth. Now, we're going to talk about that a little later when we start putting the biblical part in perspective, but I want to present both up. So it says, the third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell in the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of the water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter. Many people died from the waters that had become bitter. Now, prophecy experts insist on a symbolic interpretation of these verses, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit later. But they maintain they do not believe these events could be literal. However, there's two compelling reasons why a possibility. First, each event is physically consistent with the literal outcome that John's describing. If these texts are symbolic, what's the explanation of the interpretation of these symbols in the Bible? How can a symbolic people drink symbolic water? But there's a problem with that one too. If this water is red as blood, or if it's boiling to the point where it kills everything in the sea and you have dead sea life floating on the top, are you going to go drink that water? Because it said many people will die because of this poison water. Well, what is wormwood? Wormwood is the literal plant is a poison, actually, and in very small doses, it can be beneficial. In large doses, it can kill you. It poisons water. The plant, wormwood, poisons water. So the problem with this is, I can imagine that anyone in their right mind would go to a body of water, see dead fish floating in it, and the water is dead, and say, I'm thirsty, let's have a glass of that. Hey, dip me in a pitcher of that, and let's get home and cook some noodles in it. I mean, come on. Who in their right mind would do that? No matter how thirsty you are, would you drink poison water? Yeah, so I mean, there's a bit of a conflict there, where you have to use a little bit of common sense, that, we say, how can symbolic people drink symbolic water? Well, how can literal people drink literal poison water? I suppose there might be some that would do it. Well, it's not going to hurt. I'm thirsty. I'm going to drink it anyway. There's probably goobers and gomers out there that would be good to do that. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me. Suppose a star, an asteroid, or a comet that was white, blazing like a torch, impacts one of Earth's 7 continents. What would it hit on land? What would be its consequences? Well, there's some computer and seismic models that were created at the University of Southern California at Berkeley. They say that the ground waves would shear off water wells, that they would severely cut sewer lines for hundreds of miles in a direction. So it hit land because it doesn't say that necessarily it's going to be ocean. It says it's going to be fresh water, and we'll get into that in a few minutes, which means it may be hitting land, where it may actually cut off water supply for a half a continent, a continent. If it's in America, it may disrupt the water supply for all of Canada and America. I mean, you can go to Mexico and drink their toxic water. It's toxic now. But you see, sorry, you see what I'm saying, though. This would shear out water wells. It would underground water would be poison. To that, with an impact like that, these tectonics under the surface of the earth have to adjust to this impact. Everything within, probably a few hundred miles of ground zero would be vaporized. Now remember, a large asteroid impact would release the energy of 1,000 nuclear bombs. This energy would be dissipated. Powerful earthquake. Think how the earth would shake if we were hit with something that big. Could it knock it off its axis? Well, yeah, it probably could. It would at least shake the entire planet. If we were hit with something that big, tell me it wouldn't vibrate around the whole planet. I just can't imagine it not vibrating around the whole planet. What would that do to our molten core? What would it do to our infrastructure, our skyscrapers, our bridges? People staying on the ground would probably be knocked down around the world from the impact of something like this. This would poison the water of rivers and aquifers around the world. Millions of people would be impacted by this.